Good evening, everyone. I'm Chris Hastings, executive producer of World Channel, and we'd like to welcome you to our Returning Home and Healing Through Historic Trauma event presented in partnership with Vision Maker Media. We present tonight's event as our ongoing effort and mission to support and amplify voices from diverse communities. For World Channel, we'd like to acknowledge that the land we are streaming from in Massachusetts is the original, present, and future homelands of the first people of the Mashpee Wampanoag, the Aquana Wampanoag, the Nipmuc, and the Massachusetts tribal nations. As part of this acknowledgement, we must also reflect on the larger systemic violence that was carried out in order for these lands to become available for us to live and work on today. In our ongoing work within this space, we hope to shed light on the ways these communities continue to be exploited, trivialized, and erased in American culture, with the ultimate goal of bringing our country closer to truth and healing. I want to now turn to my friend, colleague, Francine Blythe, Executive Director of Vision Maker Media, who will introduce tonight's esteemed panel.
Hi, my name is Francine Blythe, and I am the Executive Director of Vision Maker Media. I would like to introduce you to this panel discussion presented in partnership with Vision Maker Media, World Channel, and America Reframed. I would also like to take a minute to acknowledge the native land and the location that Vision Maker Media offices reside on in Lincoln, Nebraska. We are located on the continuous homelands of the Pawnee, Ponca, Oto Missouri, Omaha, Dakota, Lakota, Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Kaw people, as well as the land of those who have been relocated, like the Ho-Chunk, Iowa, and Sac and Fox. I myself am a descendant of the Dakota and Eastern Band Cherokee from my father and Dene from my mother. I sincerely hope that you learn and consider practicing native land acknowledgements where you work and reside as a start to change and heal our world by understanding Native people. Next, I would like to introduce Jenny Monet, the moderator for this evening's panel. Jenny Monet is an award-winning journalist who writes about Indigenous rights and injustices. She is currently investigating the extreme rate at which Native American women, girls, and transgender people experience violence, sexual assault, and murder in the United States. Jenny is executive producer and host of a podcast she launched to amplify the authentic Indigenous narrative. Her career began as a TV newscaster and reporter. She's also worked in public radio and documentary filmmaking. She is a tribal citizen of the Pueblo of Laguna. Please enjoy this evening's panel presentation.
I just realized I was on mute. Gwadzi, Jenny Monet Hiname, Kwaikoe, and Anishinaabe Moda. Hello and welcome and happy Native American Heritage Month. I'm Jenny Monet, and it is wonderful to have you here. I'm speaking to you tonight from the Indigenous homelands and current homelands of the Inupiat people in the Arctic Circle. And we'd like to just welcome you to sit back for the next hour or so for the Returning Home Through Togetherness, Healing from Historical Trauma, presented by World Channel's America Reframed and Vision Maker Media. Before we get started, I want to explain a little bit of how this event is going to unravel tonight. You won't see yourself on video and you'll not be able to speak during the event, but we do want to hear from you. So you can ask questions by opening the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen and by typing in some questions, which we welcome. At the end of this broadcast, we will open up a segment for Q&A. The Zoom has rolled out on auto captioning features as well, which we want to be sure that you're aware of so that you can enjoy today's event. And you can turn on the closed captioning feature by clicking on the live transcript button, which is at the bottom of your screen. Lastly, this broadcast will obviously be touching on some sensitive subject matter about abusive Indian adoption and boarding school legacies, which we want anyone who is a survivor in the audience to be aware of these triggers. So please be mindful and know that we have resources that we will also be sharing at the end of this broadcast. So let's get started. We'd first like to begin with the trailer of our feature film, Blood Memory.
We want our children and our grandchildren, but we are not allowed to keep them.
You know, they took you away and you never went back.
For decades, U.S. adoption policies tore Native American families apart.
25 to 35% of all American Indian children were removed from their homes. 90% of those children were in non-Native families.
I came home from school one day, second grade, first grade, and my brother was gone.
They may have been told they weren't wanted. I was told I wasn't wanted.
An incalculable loss of culture and community.
So it was to literally kill the culture, the language, turn the Native person into a white person.
But I was 35 years old when I went home for the first time.
Now, the adopted and fostered relatives are coming together to heal and reconnect with their heritage.
What makes us Indian is our blood, who we are, our relatives, our community. We were always Indian. That just can't be taken. We just didn't have a way to express it.
Blood Memory on America Reframed.
So let's introduce our panel for tonight. We have our filmmaker, Drew Nicholas. He's a co-founder of the film collective Media Res and has had his work recognized by Big Sky Documentary Film Fest, Minneapolis St. Paul International Film Fest, and Santa Fe Independent Film Fest, among others. Blood Memory, which is his feature film debut, won second place for TV Best Coverage of Native America at the 2021 Native American Journalist Association. Sandra Whitehawk is Sichangu Lakota. She's an adoptee from the Rosebud Reservation, South Dakota. She is the founder and director of First Nations Repatriation Institute, the first organization of its kind whose goal it is to create a resource for First Nations people impacted by foster care or adoption to return home, reconnect, and reclaim their identity. And we also have Dr. Anitra Warrior joining us, who is an American Indian psychologist from the Ponca tribe of Oklahoma, who has dedicated her career to underserved populations throughout the state of Nebraska. In case you're wondering where you can catch Blood Memory, America Reframes Blood Memory is now streaming on worldchannel.org and available on the PBS app. You can also visit visionmakermedia.org for more programming, exploring the themes of returning home and finding more Native American Heritage Month films and features on worldchannel.org. Follow World Channel, America Reframed, and Vision Maker Media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and subscribe to World Channel, YouTube, on YouTube, or a newsletter to discover more content. Let's get to our panel. We have a clip that we'd also like to show first of the film of Sandy and her process of discovery as a young adoptee coming to terms with this legacy of Indian adoption. Let's take a look at that clip.
Ew, there I am in the first and third grades. I grew up in a town of 4,000 people, and I was the only Indian girl in the town. I acted like everything was right and okay, and it wasn't. It was just very difficult to grow up in an environment where my image wasn't reflected in any way. No teachers, no doctors. Most adoptees have that compelling drive, that pull, that wanting to find where we come from. So that was always there, but I didn't know how to do it. But I was 35 years old when I went home for the first time. It's hard to find words to it, but it just felt like coming home. Finally, it was like, this is where I'm from. Oh, you First picture with me and Leonard. Oh, here's me and my sister Deborah. See how she's got her nails painted too? She freaked out when she saw me painting my nails because she said our mother always had her nails painted red.
Hi. Here I am at my brother's house. This is my brother Leonard. Who we love.
There's Deborah. Yay, I met Deborah, 99 color.
I think that's my mom. Holy crap. And then there she is again. I could see the similarities. I can see it in the eyes that I really look like her.
It's such a great film, and I just want to bring in the filmmaker Drew and the subject Sandy. Thank you both so much for bringing us this gift of this film. It is not only timely, of course, as we are seeing boarding schools in America becoming everyday headlines in our news feeds, but it also, what I took away from watching this film, it masterfully links what I think so few people are aware of, is a century-long plan to remove Indian children from their homes, from boarding schools through adoption. And so I just really appreciated the film on that level. I'm very curious to hear from either one of you that would like to go first, what the reception has been for you with the film.
Sandy, you've shown it more recently, so what do you got? You're muted, by the way.
Dang it. You'd think you'd get it by now. I'm on Zoom every day.
Yeah.
And all I do is talk when I'm on mute. So if somebody needs to make the t-shirt, I'm on mute or you're on mute, whatever you're supposed to say. So the film was just shown today, as a matter of fact, in the guardian ad litem training here in Duluth, Minnesota. It's been seen by social workers and administrators here, and they are using it. We have there's a longer version where a Native lawyer is in there and shows a really good other side of the story to really talk to social workers, guardian ad litems about the Indian Child Welfare Act. But it was interesting because one of the responses today kind of made me laugh, because she said, this person says, well, I somehow didn't really know you were going to be in the film. I just knew we were going to see a film, and then I saw you, and then all of a sudden you're in the film, and it made me really pay attention. And I'm like, oh Lord,
Wow.
that's what makes you pay attention as a guardian ad litem in a training. But it really, it's really rewarding. I mean, to know what Drew did to make this happen over a like 10-year span, and then to see, I remember it was his vision that it would be something that would teach people, and it really has been that. So it's been really, and then of course Drew, I have a lot of fun telling him all the backstories of me and you fighting and how I
well, that's always the fun stuff, right, Sandy?
And how he would win certain arguments, and it was good that he did.
Yeah, well, I understand from Sandy, Drew, that you know, the origin story of you coming to this story was you know, by happenstance of someone you met in a coffee shop, and then you were on.
Did we lose her?
She's frozen. Maybe you should just tell the story while she's frozen.
Yeah, I can quickly just sum it up real quick. So back in, what year was that? 2010-ish. I was graduating from film school and ran into a woman at a coffee shop who mentioned to me that she was an adoptee. The way we got to that was sort of a roundabout conversation, because she overheard us talk, me and my friends talking about having graduated from film school. And she's like, oh, I got a movie for you. And then she just started talking. And the reason it specifically came up was because she had introduced herself, with her tribe and everything. And I had never met anybody at that point in my life who had introduced themselves with their tribe, and everything. And I was just very like, wow, is this the first real Native American person I've met in my life? And then it was just like that. And then she started telling me about the boarding schools after she told me about adoption, because the adoption, my perspective was, oh, adoption is this life-saving thing. And then the first federally funded boarding school being in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, right in my backyard in a town I'm very familiar with. And in this one conversation, all these firsts happened, all this new information flooding at me. And she had mentioned Sandy's name. And it didn't seem to be too much of a coincidence. There was a lot of intention there, I think. And then when I met Sandy, she had been putting it out there in her own way that I think, our collaboration kind of hit at the right time. I was able to bring the filmmaking aspect to, not that she was looking to make the movie or anything, but I think, the work needed to go to a broader perspective. And it's really cool to see, I think, to answer the first question you asked, sort of the most rewarding thing that I have still going on now that the film's been out for quite a while, is that there's still so many people who through the film are getting access to information and to communities that I don't know how long it would have taken them otherwise without the film. And that's a really cool reward to the process.
I think what's fascinating in both. Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say go ahead, Sandy.
I have to add, because this coincidence was not a coincidence. The woman that came up to him and spoke to him was an adoptee from Minnesota, no less, as well. And so here I am in Minnesota, but she was adopted and placed out there. And that none of this is coincidence. There was a higher purpose that nobody was really aware of, except maybe the person that came up and spoke to Drew. But it just is layered full of those kinds of happenings to bring it to life.
What I think is poignant in this film is the through line that we have centering the Rosebud Reservation in this narrative and on this timeline. For people who are new to this legacy, and even linking the two bookends from boarding school to the adoption era, and particularly Sandy's story, is the fact that Rosebud was targeted. And I think that that's a big word that you use, Sandy, in wanting to really draw points out across of why you're doing the work that you do, is that this was orchestrated and that there was a real directive to look at communities like Rosebud to target those children, which started at the boarding school. They were the first students to go to Carlisle, and then to have your story kind of unravel that in a very modern way. Can you speak a little bit about bringing those two timelines together from boarding school to adoption and to your work that you're doing, Sandy?
Well, over the years, speaking to adoptees, you couldn't hear a story about adoption or foster care without eventually hearing that either mother, father, or grandparent had been in boarding school. And as we continue to talk about our experiences, and I started formalizing this in a process of using our lived experiences to educate those who are making decisions about child placement. One of the other things I noticed is that we're not talking about mother, our birth mothers are still needing a voice, and our fathers. And this link from boarding school to present day is one that I don't hear enough about in terms of how we're still recovering today. We'll say we lost our language, we lost our ability to to form healthy relationships because of being tortured, having brutal upbringing, no nurturing through boarding school. But you know what? We didn't lose anything. It was taken from us. It was systematically taken. And as we move forward through our ceremonies, through our songs, sitting in those circles like you saw in the film, and reclaiming our strength and reclaiming our identity, it begins to unfold in a way that's healing. So the link between us and those who experienced boarding school, it was interesting because when my brother first started telling me about boarding school when he got done, I went, I had my own boarding school. It was called adoption. So many similarities of the emotional isolation and not having any nurturing, not understanding who you are is devastating.
Drew, what was it like for you to come across this story? I mean, you mentioned that this was the first time that you'd ever met an Indigenous person in your life, and then you come on not just a little bit of our history, but a pretty heavy part of it.
Yeah, it definitely became pretty obvious pretty quickly how big of an issue it is to take on, ICWA as a law and all of the complications, and then trying to understand like the broad strokes of Indian law to understand, once we started getting into that got very confusing. And that's why it took, basically from the moment that I met Sandy for the first time to our first time actually doing anything proactive toward shooting a movie was 3 years. And that was all research. That was all taking a list of books that Sandy had given me, taking some like a really rough draft of a memoir that she was working on, and reading her firsthand accounts of what she experienced, and then reading other folks, whether it be poetry or historical fiction or whatever it was, just to kind of get a sense of how is everyone approaching the subject, so that was like first and foremost. But then that's a whole different game when you're on the ground and you're talking with people face to face, and they're spilling out the hardest thing they've ever had to say, and you're there with a camera. And how do you navigate sticking a lens in someone's face in that moment? And we definitely had a lot of trials and tribulations. And that's a universal conflict. But then you add in that, I represent the oppressor here. I represent everything that caused this problem, and then navigating those relationships, and really at a certain point though, like the guard comes down and it became a collective process. The people that are in that circle sharing their truth at the end of the film, I really think that that became like it became a family aspect, like we were bouncing ideas off of them. We held their stories with very much affection and responsibility. I think that was the big thing, is just figuring out how to be responsible to the folks who were the most vulnerable, and it was certainly a very complicated process to go through, also in my 20s, and I think, from 21 to 31, by the time I hit the end of the actual filmmaking process here, I feel like I aged so much in that time because of these collaborations, and I don't know, I think it's definitely put the whole trajectory of my life in a whole, like, I don't think I'd be anywhere near the person I've been able to become without talking, because I too was sharing stories and working through my own process, and I think that mutual vulnerability was key,
Yeah. And I want to
Sam-
add about the filming of the individual testimonies. We took it was not entered into, oh, here, tell your story and here's a camera at all. You know, we entered each time that those stories were shared. We had set up our center, we had our medicines, we were taking care of them, nurturing them, making sure that they were okay. But they truly wanted to do this because they want the world to know what really happened during this process of adoption. Those that had good experiences as healthy, balanced homes, and those who had brutality in their homes. Everyone wanted the world to know. So just for the people that are watching, no one was re-traumatized. Everyone's afraid of that, thinking that, you know, we can't do this. But Drew can testify, you know, over the years of him watching, listening, and participating, it was very healing for them.
Thank you for sharing that, Sandy. And you're going to stay with us here. So I want to give Drew just a few final words before we circle back to you at the tail end of our conversation. Sure. Anything else that you'd like to add with this segment?
No, I feel like I covered most of what I would, like to say here, but I do just want to, thank everybody for jumping in on the participation, participating in the dialogue here, and, for World Channel and Vision Maker to continue to support the film and, bring it back out and continue the conversation and not just let it be sitting on a shelf somewhere. I really appreciate that. So thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thanks. We'll circle back with you here in a little bit. We want to share another clip with you, and it features Sandy again as she is kind of going through this process of discovery of tracing the lineage of adoptions from boarding schools, including archival government clips that promote the mission of boarding schools. This is what I think this film does so well, is connecting these two timelines. So let's have a look.
Race and culture have influenced how we practice adoption in this country, because how we do it is not necessarily how we did it at the beginning, and it's not how it's done in other places in the world.
It's hard when you get into the state child welfare system to say, wow, here is a nationwide conspiracy to remove kids, except for the fact that there were nationwide conspiracies to remove kids.
One generation, their children were systematically removed and sent to boarding schools. The next generation, their children were systematically taken by private adoption agencies and placed with white Christian families because that's what was going to make them better people.
Through the agencies of the government, they are being rapidly brought from their state of comparative savagery and barbarism to one of civilization.
Sandy, when I see that clip, the first thing that comes to mind is I just want to say, welcome back, welcome home. And I think that that is something that is so central in your work that speaks to me, is that you deliberately call these homecomings for the adoptees that you're working with, what I call the heart work that you're doing. I want to bring in Dr. Anitra Warrior to talk a little bit about what this process of discovery has been for you as you've unraveled these timelines. Dr. Anitra Warrior, can we bring her in as well? Oh, there she is. Great. You both have so much similarity in the work that you're doing, really looking at what lives at the core of this identity. And we saw that in the first clip with you, Sandy, about you going through those photographs and trying to make sense of all of this. And then we have Dr. Warrior, who's kind of doing that work every day with Morningstar Counseling. So in that vein, how did this film speak to you, Dr. Warrior, in looking at the work that you're doing and understanding Sandy's story on a more human level?
Yeah, well, thank you for allowing me to be part of tonight's presentation. And I really want to be respectful of Sandy's time, so I am going to keep it short. I think what she has to share is so powerful with her knowledge and her experience. So I really want to make sure that we honor that. And so I will take very little time in what my experience was as a clinician watching this, also having family members who have experienced a significant level of loss. In the beginning of the film, it's not shown in this particular clip, but in the beginning of the film, Sandy had mentioned this was an experience that she observed, that she wasn't a part of, and that spoke to me immediately. And then when she started talking about, I remember the smell in the car. I remember the truck and the colors, and even remembering seeing the pores in her adoptive parents' skin. And as I was thinking about that and listening to that and just being moved by this, I was thinking about the multiple levels of triggers that our young ones can experience. And this was taking me to a different thought perspective, because it's really difficult at times to identify what some of those triggers may have been. And Sandy, I don't know if you have this experience, but with certain smells kind of shifting your mood, or certain things that might have reminded you of that time. And then there's a state of emotional dysregulation that happens as a result of being triggered from these memories that might seem almost innocuous, but just things that I can remember, but they can be triggers. And so I think that's really important, especially when we're talking about working with children who are experiencing trauma, children who are even having their identity challenged. This is really important for us to keep in mind what those strong memories are, what those physical experiences are also, again, because of the power behind those triggers and what that could lead to in terms of that emotional dysregulation, the changes in behaviors that we see, the disruption to sleep. So I was very honored to be able to watch this film and see that, and it just touched my heart. And so again, that's why I'm saying I want to make sure that I give Sandy plenty of time to speak on this experience, but from a clinical perspective, those were things that were staying with me, because this is something that is still occurring for our children in terms of identifying those children, those memories, what we're seeing for them, how we're identifying what those triggers might be. Thank you.
So I don't have any of that anymore. I've had a lot of healing. By the time I went home, I had quite a bit of healing. I didn't have everything from the time I stepped foot on the reservation was healing, and it wasn't, and I don't like to use the word trigger. It was a lot of reminders, triggers on a gun. And so I don't need to use that word. I had a lot of memories, a lot of recalls, but those are all also gone by the time I went home because of the healing I was able to. What happened though, was I didn't have that spiritual healing of understanding who I was through expressing my belief and my faith through our sun dances and our sweat lodges. But so what I did, I remember though, when I realized that what had happened to me is I disassociated at 18 months old. I left my body, and I took my body and put it in the bed of the truck and looked through the window, because I had to do that to survive the trauma of not being with my family. But I didn't know that wasn't a full memory. That used to be just a blip, because I didn't have any place to, full on. Plus I thought, people that are in active addiction and other traumas, we think we're pretty crazy anyway. I probably made it up, didn't have any reference for it. But I did finally, when I was in a group therapy addressing that, I was able to ask my adoptive mom, did this happen? Did that happen? Was I placed in a truck between the two of you? And she confirmed everything for me. So it did happen. And I disassociated quite regularly until I was 11 years old. And I think within a few years, by the time I was 14, I started drinking and doing drugs. And so that became the medication that kept me from that. So I had another PTSD that did all the things that you're talking about. But I had deep shame and feelings of inadequacy and deep sense of loss and not having any center from being adopted. But what you talk about, though, some adoptees do report that they do, and we all had very similar feelings of or symptoms of PTSD and or trauma. For sure. And even if the home is a stable, loving home where there is true unconditional love, individuals still experience deep sense of grief and loss. And then they have to go through, how can I have this feeling when my parents love me and I love them? And they have to sort out, because in white society, it's nuclear. In Indian communities, it's expansive. That you always have room for another relative. And so you're taught in white way, you can only have so many people in your family. And so I can't possibly tell them, I want to know who I am and where I come from. It's a huge leap for some individuals.
Something,
Sandy, I am. Oh no, something that we made up was looking at the study that you conducted in 2012 to 2013, when there aren't a lot of studies like it to look at this impact and some of the things that you're talking about. And Dr. Warrior, I'd love your input on this too, but if we could pull up the card of some of the results that were there, and I'd love to have you walk us through what some of those takeaways were for you, Sandy, and yes, the lead into the impetus of the study. Go ahead.
So 126 respondents to this survey identified as Native American. We looked at 95 of them because 95 said that they had been reunited with their family or some person in their family. What we found, I wasn't surprised at all what we found, because we knew anecdotally by listening to people for decades that most of our experiences were negative, harmful, hurtful in some way. So here we have, as you can see, the result of that. 24% of these individuals experienced sexual abuse, 46% experienced physical abuse, 49% experienced emotional abuse. You know, and within that emotional abuse lies the micro and macro aggressions that happen, and you don't have a voice or a way to talk about that, because how can you when you don't know who you are? So you can't explain. You just have this thing inside you, and your parents and siblings and relatives, all your adopted relatives could be the ones who do it on an ongoing basis, and certainly within school and jobs and other places. But so 49 and 51% sought out mental health therapy for the emotional, physical, and sexual abuse. But really, sadly, was the, is there another screen showing the, is it?
No, this will be the only one, but I know you had CDC figures about maybe those that
well, abuse. We had the depression rate was 71 out of the 95 reported feeling depressed. And that is significant because the CDC says only 1 in 10 Native citizens of the United States report depression. 43 out of the 95 contemplated or planned suicide, and 20 attempted. So that speaks to all kinds of things. But what I think of is just the emotional isolation an adoptee or someone who grew up in foster care has gone through. No language to explain what's happening to you. No, and certainly if you say something, a lot of times families want to just, that's not what that is. That's, they really minimize racism big time. And so it's really challenging and difficult for an individual. They end up going through that by themselves.
Well, I want to thank First Nations Reparations, Repatriation Institute for doing that study along with the University of Minnesota. And I'm just curious, Dr. Warrior, you know, in terms of having the kind of data available to penetrate some of these problems, how is that in your the work that you do? How common are you able to reach for those kind of studies to support the decolonizing of counseling and mental health and wellness in your work?
Yeah, and within our clinic, this is something that we're working towards in terms of decolonizing what behavioral health looks like. And what is different about that, when I talk about decolonizing behavioral health, this is going to be something like what Sandy's referencing earlier when she had talked about people telling their stories, sharing their truths, and the level of prep work that they did before that to make sure that it was safe. You know, we have a specific model that we follow when we work with children, and it's an evidence-based model, but these are already practices within our culture that we do. So what you explain, Sandy, is a part of a Western-based, evidence-based model for trauma-focused cognitive behavior therapy. And that's retelling that story. And so these are things that we keep in mind as we're providing treatment. Those cultural considerations come first. There's a level of history that we want to gather, even during our intake, to understand also what Sandy had referenced in terms of our extended family, not just the family that's within the home, the extended family, because that all has an impact on us. That's who we are as Native people, because we're connected in these ways. So having information about this and knowing when we're working with individuals what that treatment needs to look like, because I'll be honest, you know, the level of cultural identity, it ranges, and not everyone wants to be a part of those practices, and that's okay. That's where they choose to be, and we honor and we respect that. But for those who are open to that, who will take the lead, because that's not ever my role to introduce or to lead them in that, but it is my role to welcome their whole being, even if it's something that they're exploring. That is my role within our time together, to have that safe space. So those are some things that we're doing in terms of how we're addressing some of these things, how we're changing what behavioral health looks like, or what it looks like, and really trying to focus on the culture and the importance of that, and recognizing that this healing is something that can be done through our cultural practices, because it has been a part of our survival, and that can come before the evidence-based model.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I think
we have a question about availability. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Sandy.
In our way of life, we have always had a way to help and heal our spirit, help and heal our bodies. When the intrusion happened, some of those life ways, the majority of them were outlawed. We knew how to take care of our spirits. We knew the importance of preparing a man to go to war in another tribe for territory or whatever may be happening. We knew that when they came back, we needed to take care of their spirit. And that veteran societies still do that today. We do it through our song and our ceremony. We literally were the authors of creating new neural pathways. We just didn't call them that. We knew that the mind and the body needed to be healed, and we did that. Part of the reason we knew that is because our connection to the natural world and our connection spiritually. So we were given those life ways. So we're not creating anything new necessarily, other than people haven't been able to tell their stories, tell their experiences. The other thing is, when we do it publicly in the way that we welcome relatives back, we're addressing the individual, the family, and the community all at once. And people may not want to come out in the center the first time. 7 years later, they might want to come out, because that happens all the time. Someone may not want to have anything to do with culture. They just want to find their family. But maybe 5 years later, they go, remember when I said no? I'm ready now. So we have to not push and take people where they're at. And it's a lot to take on. So all those changes, some people are ready to dive in the deep end. And some people want to come at it from the 3-foot end and wade down to the deep end. And we just, whatever way makes them feel safe is what we accept.
And I think what's important about
Well, I think that's
is the level of care.
Go ahead, Dr. Warrior.
The level of care that's provided as they share, whether it's in that 3-foot or 12-foot, but that's what makes the changes happen for us in the brain, because I can talk about this traumatic event in a safe place where now I'm comforted. So it's not me engaging in risky behaviors and thinking about this negativity, or it's not me being in a bad relationship and reinforcing what I experienced as a child, reinforcing my beliefs that I now have about myself. When I'm able to talk about this and experience this in love and in healing and in a safe place, that changes how our brain processes that information, and it's part of that healing.
Can I just say that this part of the discussion is a wonderful segue into our next clip, and it highlights the heart of Sandy's work, her 20 years on this journey. And in the film, it features the very first welcoming ceremony on the Rosebud Reservation. And for Sandy, it was quite special because in this event, you actually are reunited with your uncle. Let's take a look.
What is your name again?
Mervyn Garniel.
Mervyn Garniel. As in Nina Whitehawk Garniel?
Yeah.
Did you call me years ago? My daughter took a message and I lost the number. I called you?
When she died.
No, that was Deb, I bet.
Okay, yeah,
my sister Deb.
Yeah.
How did Deb know about you, though, and not tell me?
I don't know, because I work at the VA at the time she called me.
All right, because I thought I knew who all her brothers and sisters were. So, here we are. During the ceremony, it's even more powerful that I have an uncle who's actually my uncle who will be standing there. So it's a really wonderful surprise. After the evening grand entry, I'd like you to come over and meet my family. And we camp out. Leonard's camp is right behind the flags, the veterans flags and stuff. So
the ones that's got all the Vietnam veteran flags on it. That's where we camp.
Are you? So we're we're neighbors. Awesome. Oh, cool. Yeah, you had better go post your colors. All right, we'll see you.
That's such
So
a great
what's funny, I gotta tell you what's funny. The reason I'm laughing is that this was 2015. I went home in 1988. 1988. And then I find out, and my mom is the oldest of 20 children. So I haven't even met everybody yet. And then he's one of 5 on the Whitehawk side who no one told me about. And so one of the other relatives lives there in Rosebud. So, but I'm laughing because any of my Indigenous brothers and sisters out there, they get it. Our families are far and wide.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And so we've forged a great relationship, and I'm so proud of him. He came to a screening and shared his experience when he served on the Nebraska Indian Affairs Commission, and had a story about a removal himself. And so it was good. He's a Vietnam veteran, an alcohol and drug counselor, and he's amazing. So in fact, that year, so that's August. And then in November, when we have the our gathering for our children and returning adoptees powwow in November in Minneapolis every year, I had his color guard come and be the color guard for our powwow that year. So it was really, really wonderful.
Well, it's so powerful too in the nature of what you are doing with the ceremony itself. And the film showcases the first ever circle at the powwow that you create for the adoptees who are coming home. Can you talk a little bit about how you came to that kind of space, creating that kind of space, and what it means?
I'm going to have to do the short version because it's somewhat of a long story. But in 1999, I was home. I went home every year from 88 on because my uncle said, "This is your home. Come home every year at Rosebud because that's where you'll meet your other relatives who live off the reservation." And so I did that. And in 1999, I was there just hanging out, having a good time. And I remember that year specifically because I didn't have anything hanging over my head trauma-wise. Life was just good. I understood. It wasn't even about my adoption at this point that I was recovering from. I was recovering from other things, relationship things, and understanding who I am, of what am I going to do now, kind of thing. And because life was changing career-wise. And then I witnessed this special where they were honoring a Korean War veteran. And something struck me about it, that I had never seen a welcome for our adopted relatives. And I started thinking, oh my gosh, what would happen if we stopped every year at our annual gatherings and just announced, because every year, at every gathering, someone is there looking for relatives, I guarantee it. And because that's what you're told to do. That's what people tell you to do. Well, go to this gathering, go to that. We were in Alaska, Anchorage, Alaska, and somebody said, go to this picnic. You'll probably find, we were helping a friend of ours find a relative, and we did. But anyway, I thought, what if we had this song? But I really shut myself down because I thought, well, who am I to be thinking this? Because certainly our spiritual leaders know about this, and it would be happening if it was supposed to be. So I didn't share it. And I just said, well, what if we did this? Just take a few minutes, reconnect people, celebrate our mothers who gave us life, regardless of the situation, that they shouldn't carry any more shame, and on and on. And so that's August. And then by March of the following year, 2000, I meet Chris Leaf. And I don't know what happened, but somehow I felt comfortable enough to tell him what I saw. And he literally said, you better give me some tobacco because you've had a vision. And I laughed and said, vision, what do you mean? I haven't even gone out on a hill or anything. And he said, no, this needs to happen. And so I didn't know that this man was an alcohol and drug counselor, that he was the spiritual advisor for the National Indian Child Welfare Association. And within minutes, he had a plan of who would make this song. And he said, you're right. We need to be bringing our extended family home. We need to be bringing our relatives home. And he started mentoring me, even though I didn't get it in the beginning of why. I just figured he'd do it because he's the elder, right? He's the spiritual guy. And he really put me and Jerry in this position of, because he said, I'm not going to be here forever, and basically, after he passed, we just kept going, because what we did until he passed, we would just go where he would take us, right? Oh, this community would like us to have this. And then when he passed, Jerry said to me, I'll help you. We'll keep doing this. And then we moved forward. But everything we do ceremonially, we learned from Chris. He's the person who put it as it should be. And Arvo Looking Horse, the keeper of the pipe, we could lots of consultation with him as well.
Oh, that's so good. Thank you for that rich backstory there, Sandy. One thing that resonates with me in both of your work and what you've just said is, these are first steps, saying, we need to start doing this, we need to start doing that. And I think we're starting to see a lot of really powerful first steps in many different sectors. We have a quote from a Washington State Supreme Court judge, Raquel Montoya Lewis, who this year, she's been really, she's from the Isleta Pueblo. And in June of 2021, her latest decision around an ICWA case that went en banc really kind of struck home in what legal experts are saying is possibly one of the most cited quotes that will be cited in case law around the Indian Child Welfare Act and all the challenges that it's currently facing. And quickly, she says, the history of the United States and its relationship with Native tribes, communities, and families tell a story of promises made and broken. We rely on the commitment made by Congress and the Washington State Legislature to decline to remove Native children from their families and communities unless absolutely necessary, and to actively work toward reunification in those limited instances when the high standard for removal has been met. Today, we hold our state child welfare system and our courts to those promises. This is powerful language when we start to look at what it means to reclaim, repatriate, heal, move forward. And I know that this quote was on your radar, Sandy, and this particular case. I think maybe they even cited some of your study in that opinion. And I just would love to hear from both of you about, this new time that we're in, where Indigenous affairs in general has more visibility than perhaps ever before, and there's more of an acceptance for receiving this kind of systemic injustice, and starting to look at what are we doing to now work towards correction, repatriation, healing.
Well, Justice Montoya used our study, the results of our study, to influence the decision, that everyone, that they ended up agreeing on. She did the exact thing that we did the study for. I wanted it to be used in court to demonstrate the huge risk in the well-being of adoptees in adoption, that it should be not the first and not the second, but that family preservation needs to be the focus, because look at the result. It's a huge mental health risk that we do not need to be engaged in. We need to be engaged in family preservation. So when I wanted to do this study, it's interesting because what motivated me to do this study was being a qualified expert witness in a court case and not having the kind of study and numbers that I knew existed out there. And I was what's his face? Mark Fidler was the lawyer for this, for the side that wanted to adopt these children out to this white couple. And I remember walking in the parking lot and thinking to myself, dang it, we need a study that shows what we know. If we just ask the questions, we have to find out about their well-being. And so we did, and that's how it came to be. So I figured it'd be used in the lower courts, hopefully regularly, right? And here, Raquel contacted me and said, "Where's your study?" I gave it to her, and I didn't know what it was going to be used for. She just asked for it, and I said, "Yes, here it is." And there it was. So we can't deny that. You cannot deny that. So I was excited that the first place that it's used in a hearing deciding about a family, about a child, that it was in the Supreme Court. So I didn't even envision that. I envisioned the county court, county and state.
Well, that's good reinforcement then. Dr. Warrior, when you look at some of the work that you're doing, something that resonated with me was that, these are the first big steps that you're really taking a look at in looking at your space that you work in, healthcare, the healthcare industry, and really looking at mental health in a way that meets the unique needs of Indigenous peoples. Can you talk a little bit about that?
About how we're meeting the needs, or Sorry.
Yeah, what your hopes are for the future. Yeah, no, just with your work, you're taking a unique approach and looking at Indigenous communities that might not often fit the mold of a very colonial structure of healthcare. And you know, I know that we spoke a little bit about your vision for what a future, like a decolonial future, might look like for mental health.
Yeah, so before I do, let me go ahead and give a heads up really quick. My little ones that I'm actually adopting are in the background, so you may hear some screaming. So I apologize for that if you hear that in the background. But yes, what I think would be very beneficial is really understanding how the confines of behavioral health, that Western model, does not fit for all who are receiving behavioral health. That's where that stigma can start to come in and be associated with it. Because with these models, when we look at these clinical models, they're so based on deficiencies, so based on what's wrong. When we change that paradigm, we can focus on strengths and give that the opportunity to heal, and also look at what do we do outside of the office space. So it's not just about coming into this office and talk to me for 50 minutes to an hour as your therapist. No, let's be a relative. Let me be your relative. Let me be here to work with you. I've had the fortunate experience to work with the Asante, and within our collective work, when we serve people, we refer to them as our relatives, not as a client, not as a patient. When they come into the space that we have for them, you know, food is offered, water is given, we eat with them regularly, we give star quilts, we're there for funerals, you know, and so it's really shifting that. And within our training, what can happen is you don't want to have that dual relationship. You really want to make sure you put those boundaries in place. You don't want to do any self-disclosure. But I can tell you, I work with so many people that are even of different tribes, but we're talking about, I'm your auntie, you're my auntie, you know, and that's just shifting what that relationship looks like. So that, I think, could be really beneficial, even within rural populations. And it's been accepted well in terms of our model being used across settings. So I think that could be really helpful if it's shared and provided at a larger scale, and also introduced into training, because this experience that Sandy has had, and so many other people, is people aren't going to necessarily know how to respond. They can read information about adoptions, you know, but until they understand what that Indigenous experience is, the true meaning behind it, and what culture can do for that healing, I think they're going to continue to do a disservice. So really gaining that knowledge is going to be so powerful, and it needs to be integrated into our training systems and into the work that we're doing. And that's what we're attempting to do in our partnerships with the colleges throughout Nebraska.
Thank you for that, Dr. Warrior. And before I want to ask Sandy one last question on this, but I want to just remind our audience that if they have questions, to please drop them in the chat, because we'll then soon be coming to your questions in the next segment. But Sandy, you know, ICWA is under incredible attack right now in the courts, as we just saw in Washington, but also in the U.S. Supreme Court. There's a case pending. And I'm just curious, you know, what's next in line for the work that you're doing with First Nations Repatriation Institute, and whether or not it's you know, targeting some of these legal challenges ahead?
Well, right now we are in the middle of a birth mother study, and also we'll be including birth fathers, because there's absolutely nothing on either one of them. And it's easy to continue to take children if there are no mothers or fathers. So I want to expose what we know and what we've seen from our mothers and from our fathers. Our mothers continually tell us they were told to make a plan and a goal like this, because the adoption industry really takes advantage of women who are might be scared, not sure what their next step is going to be. They're pregnant and situation might be difficult and challenging. And we need that full circle experience to speak to that. We're not lawyers, so we can't argue that law piece. However, the law needs to have things behind it, evidence behind it. And so we're going to just continue doing what we're doing and continue to share our lived experience to demonstrate why the law was passed in the first place and the benefit that it has in healing our individuals, families, and our communities.
We'll bring Drew and Dr. Warrior back for Q&A, but as we're preparing for that, can you just briefly explain ICWA for some audience members that might not be aware of why it was implemented?
And I think Drew put in the chat the study guide, which will have all of that in there, because someone did message me and asked me what ICWA was. So very quickly, Indian Child Welfare Act was passed in 1978. It was passed because at least 25 to 35% of all Indian children were removed from their homes. The Association of American Indian Affairs did a study back then. So ICWA has placement preferences in the event that a child is removed from their home. And these placement preferences are meant to make sure a child stays within the extended family, the community, and the tribe. There's a thing called active efforts, which means because this is a federal law, their social workers, social services have to provide not just the phone number to treatment, but maybe a ride to treatment, not just a phone number for or a place to just that extra. I always say active efforts means you leave the building. You leave the building, you get individuals involved in the community and work in that way. So that's just a really brief thing about the Indian Child Welfare Act. What we fight with that is people thinking we're getting special services. They don't realize that the act was passed because of our political status, not a race-based law. And they're thinking that we're getting special treatment. And so that's the battle. And then you heard, oh no, you didn't hear, excuse me. I thought we were watching the other film. So the battle then, so you gotta follow the money though. There's a money reason why they're doing this as well, because so you heard Denise say it was cheaper to have boarding school than to have wars, and then it became cheaper to have adoption than have boarding schools. However, I forget, it's in the billions somewhere, the adoption industry. It's a
14 billion. Thank
you, Drew. We are the commodity, especially brown babies, brown children.
Oh, for sure. The National Adoption Agency actually posted on its website, support for when ICWA cases, advance at stripping away ICWA from tribes. That was most seen around Brackeen. So, it's not hidden. These aren't hidden facts. Drew, I'm curious, from coming away from the film, what were some issues raised that might be inspiring for new work of yours around Indian country, or that other people should just, start digging in and being aware of? Do you have any plans for next work?
No, I do not.
Don't I have an idea that you keep saying? La, 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 la.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still, everything's still running its course with this, and I'm just trying to give what I can to it in the time I have available, and continue to build out the resources and stuff. And I think down the road, it'd be really great to sort of reapproach all the content that we have. And we've talked about making digital archives and things like that. But we're still, so we've got all these transcripts and interviews. Right now, it's really been a piecemeal when people reach out to us because they know we have a bunch of content that may not be in the film, we've been able to share that and get that out in other means. So one example of that is the new season of This Land podcast by Rebecca Nagel, right? She's Cherokee, and season 1, she tells her personal story and ends it with ICWA and the Goldwater Institute getting involved. And then season 2 is entirely focused on ICWA and the current litigation. And she looks at it from all these different perspectives. She really did a deep dive into she followed the money, as Sandy said. And so we were able to provide some content to supplement elements of the story she wasn't able to get, specifically with some of the stuff we had on the legal end with Mark Fidler and the Goldwater Institute. So that's in her podcast, but then she went much further. So that is, and those are the ways that I'm trying to be active in continuing to push it forward. Obviously, COVID, had a huge impact too on face-to-face meetings. So the film's been used in a way of like bringing people together virtually to have those conversations. So that's pretty exciting too. But yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, I'm just tracking things and seeing what happens here.
That's great. That's great. We have an audience question for Dr. Warrior. What can white therapists learn from natives to open themselves to native culture and the work that's needed on the ground?
Well, thank you for that question. That's a very good question. And something that I would highly recommend is getting to know the communities, getting to know your tribal communities, the indigenous populations that are within your area. So if you live next to a reservation or you're serving people from a reservation, go to those events that are public events. Get to know the people that you're serving. You would really be welcomed in that, to learn more about the culture, to learn how to incorporate that without it being something invasive. If they see you regularly, you're going to be part of the community, and that's going to be a reflection of your investment in their people, in their service. So that's going to be huge. One of the biggest things that I could recommend. If you're in more of an urban setting, see what Indian centers are available. I had in my training, I had worked with a provider who had said she had one person from a certain ethnic background. And so she didn't think it was necessary to do a high level of research. And I thought, oh, absolutely not. You still need to do that research. You still need to get connected, because there could be, based on the culture, the history, clinical implications from that. So it is very important to learn more about the history. Take classes. There are a number of classes that are offered even through colleges like the Nebraska Indian Community College. They offer courses on history. Any of the tribal colleges are willing to share information, but learning more about the history, the collective nature of the people, and not just the deficits, but also recognizing strengths and helping bring that to light as well.
In the state that you live, whatever state it is, just Google, what are the Indian tribes in my state? And go to each website and just start doing some research that way. And that's how you find out what events are happening that you may not otherwise know about. And private gatherings are not going to be publicized. So you can go to powwows and other gatherings because they wouldn't be publicized otherwise. At least in, like online or poster somewhere, it would be word of mouth. So that's one way. Most people don't know how many reservations are in the state that they live in. So you can also start there. And what Anitra said, go hang out.
Go hang out. That's right. That's how it's done. That's right. There's also the World Channel this year had its own series centering decolonizing mental health, hearing from mental health advocates, and they certainly included Indian country in that overview. We put in the notes here in the chat the link for that as well. So that is also a good resource. And we also have an audience question for you, Sandy, around your military service. Thank you for your service, but the question is why that was not mentioned and connected in the film. Somebody said, I have seen Bloodminary 10 times. 10
That's
times.
awesome.
So if you want to
They
see
said,
my
why wasn't Sandy Whitehock's military service notice?
because the picture wasn't in the picture collection. If you want to see that, you can watch the People's Protectors. I'm in that, and then a little bit of my military stuff's in there. But just to let you know, I did a fun tidbit about the film is Drew would have these really great creative ideas. Okay, I know we should do this. And then I'd be like, no, we're not going to do that. Because I didn't mind the camera being there when I was working because I'd forget about it. Because they just were really good at you literally would just forget they're there. But he wanted me to have this staged thing of going through these pictures. And I thought, oh, for crying out loud, no way, that looks so stupid. And that's exactly what I told him. I said, I'm not going to do that. It looks stupid on there. And anyway, we went back and forth. And finally I said, okay, if you can find the pictures, I'll go through them. Thinking he was not going to find them because if you could see where he had to go look, it was a little miracle that he found the pictures. And so I had to go through them. And so, yeah, so there you go. He was right and I was wrong that time. But you can tell I wasn't ready for it. My hair's not combed. I got old nail polish on. I mean, it's just bad.
Oh, well, it was a wonderful film. We don't take away those tiny flawed details, if that's what you want to call them. And I just want to thank you both for, having the confidence in one another to bring us this gift. Thank you so much. And also Dr. Warrior, thank you so much for joining this conversation. Your input here was valuable and generative. And I would just like to also thank the audience for their attention. Please pay attention to the chat. We dropped some important links in there that will not be broadcast with the resources that we have. We did provide a list of resources, but also in the chat, you can find this, the resources that the film provides through that link, Sandy's study, the Decolonizing Mental Health link as well. And then from our, what we would like to offer as part of this conversation are links and just resources and numbers. If we have that card, we can show that show the links to the National Indian Child Welfare Association. There it is. Thank you. The First Nations Repatriation Institute, of which Sandy is founder and executive director of, which offers trainings, all kinds of portals of information that Sandy is just a wealth of knowledge of in her 20 plus years of doing this work. Morningstar Counseling, which is Dr. Anitra Warrior's practices. You can reach her at morningstar-counseling.com. Strong Heart Native Helpline. I'm such a fan of this. It's had a slow start from around 2012, and it's just been chugging along. Over COVID, it created a chat system when people were in quarantine, hunkering down with people, and made it safer. But we have the number here, 1-844-762-8483. You can also find them online. And then the Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition at boardingschoolhealing.org. And that website just gets better and better as their work continues. So I can't recommend it enough. And then through my work with Indigenously, my weekend newsletter, I'm also piloting a project around reclaiming these narratives through the boarding school legacy of Carlisle. It's called the Arrow Reporting Residency. A lot of people don't know that through the archives, our relatives would call the newspaper the Arrow. It was one of the popular newspapers at the time that was propagandizing the experience at Carlisle. And this Arrow Reporting Residency is a reclaiming of these narratives This month in 1879, the Carlisle Indian Boarding School began its mission to kill the Indian and save the man, but it's an unfinished story, and we think those who live with this legacy should be the ones to tell it. I'm hosting a residency for people to apply all of this month. It'll probably be extended till the end of the year, just because we need some time to promote it and get the word out. You can find more at indigenously.org/Arrow residency, or you can find me online and drop me an email if you have any questions. Please share far and wide. And again, we just want to thank you for all being here. You can watch America's Reframed Blood Memory on streaming right now this month on worldchannel.org. It's also available on the PBS app. And please also visit our friends at visionmakermedia.org for more programming. They have a wonderful rundown this month of Native-centric films in honor of Native American Heritage Month, including Returning Home, which also is in partnership with the World Channel. You can follow World Channel, America Reframed, and Vision Maker on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all the good spots. All right. Am I back up? I hope so. Thank you. Thank you all for your patience with my slow Arctic email. And thank you to all of our panelists. It was really an honor to share this conversation with you. It can be tender at times. Sandy Whitehawk of the Sicangu Lakota Nation. We have Drew Nicholas, our filmmaker. Thank you so much for the work that you gave to us, Drew, and your process of discovery. And Dr. Anitra Warrior of Morningstar Counseling and citizen of the Ponca Nation. I'm Jenny Monet, Laguna Pueblo, and author of Indigenously, Decolonizing Your Newsfeed. Thank you so much for being here, and happy Native American Heritage Month.